started like any other Thursday. I was in the garage workshop sanding down an oak console I'd been working on for a few weeks. The kind of project I'd lose myself in: measured cuts, stained edges, the smooth back and forth of the orbital sander. It was my zone, my therapy. The scent of sawdust and lacquer filled the air, and the only sound was the buzz of the machine and the occasional Spotify ad cutting through my speaker. Then my phone buzzed. I didn't check it right away. My hands were dusty and I hate getting fingerprints on my phone. A couple of minutes passed before I finally wiped them off on a towel and took a look. It was a message from Stephanie. Urgent work party. Back by midnight. Love you, yellow heart. That was it. Just those few words. I remember the emoji. A yellow heart. Friendly, warm. But not the red one she used to send when we were still in that newlywed phase. I'd noticed that change over the last few months, but I'd never said anything. Small stuff, right? Who complains about emoji selection? I stared at the message for a second longer than usual, then slid the phone into my pocket. I didn't think too much of it at first. Stephanie's agency was chaotic. They were always springing some late-night campaign prep or last-minute team dinner. She'd had a big pitch coming up that Friday, something for a retail client with deep pockets. It made sense. And yet, it didn't. Maybe it was intuition. Or maybe it was the way the message was worded. Urgent work party sounded too rehearsed, too purposeful, like she was trying to head off a question I hadn't even asked. A minute later, my phone buzzed again. This time, a notification from Google Maps. Stephanie had shared her live location. Now, here's the thing: I didn't ask her to. We weren't one of those couples that tracked each other like hawks. But sometimes she'd share her location if she was walking home late or heading somewhere sketchy. Safety thing. At least that's what it used to be. So when I saw her name pop up with a little blue, I opened the map out of habit. My stomach dropped. She wasn't near the agency building at all. She was downtown, in the Riverwalk district, and the location pin was hovering over a lounge. A sleek, upscale place called Bordeaux. I knew it because we'd been there once, for our anniversary 2 years ago. Candlelight, velvet booths, overpriced desserts. Not the kind of spot you go to for a work party. I zoomed in closer. Her pin was exactly over a table near the window. The app marked it as table for two. I stood there, holding the phone, heart suddenly thudding in my ears. In that moment, the garage felt too quiet, too far removed from the world she was in. The contrast hit me hard. Me in a dusty t-shirt, hands rough from work, and her, wherever she was, whoever she was with. Before I could talk myself out of it, I took a *T. Then another, just to be sure the time and location were locked in. I don't know what made me do it. Self-preservation, maybe, or the creeping dread that this moment was going to mean something later. And then, without really thinking it through, I opened Bordeaux's website and pulled up the wine list. She had a favorite, a bold red from Spain she always ordered when we were out, Tempranillo, dry with a hint of blackberry and something earthy. I ordered a glass through the lounge's online reservation system and left a note. For the lady at table for two. 1 glass. No guest. From your husband. I clicked submit before I could reconsider. I didn't expect anything dramatic. I wasn't hoping to catch her in the act or stage some kind of reveal. I just wanted to place a question in the middle of her evening. Something subtle but sharp. A reminder that I wasn't as unaware as she assumed. Then I sat down at my workbench and waited. I couldn't focus on the console anymore. The wood didn't feel right under my hands. My mind was running, replaying the last few weeks, trying to assemble a timeline out of random memories. The password change. That was the first real shift I should have noticed. 2 weeks ago, she'd casually mentioned she had to reset her phone passcode. IT stuff, she'd said, smiling like it was no big deal. We're all doing it. She laughed about how annoying it was to remember a new 6-digit number. But now that I thought about it, she used to leave her phone everywhere, on the kitchen counter, the bathroom sink, the arm of the couch while she showered. Not anymore. Since then, it had been glued to her. She never left it behind. It went with her from room to room, screen down, silent. Back in the house, I paced for a bit, but it was useless. I turned off the sander and went inside, showered, changed into something clean, and sat on the couch with the TV on mute. Around 12:40 a.m., the front door opened. Stephanie came in carrying a white box wrapped in a silver ribbon. I recognized the logo. It was from the branding team's print vendor. She held it like it was precious cargo. "Hey, babe," she said, voice light. "Sorry I'm late." It turned into this whole last-minute prep thing. Ryan had this idea for a new deck layout and we just kind of ran with it. Ryan. There it was. The name came out like she'd practiced it. Just casual enough. Just familiar enough to sound normal. She kicked off her shoes by the door, then walked over to the kitchen and set the box down. She was dressed up, tailored black pants, silk blouse, makeup still fresh. And that perfume. The one she used sparingly, the expensive bottle I bought her for her birthday. She noticed me watching her and gave me a quick smile. Not guilty. Not awkward. Just performance-level cheerful. Oh, and I stopped by Ryan's afterward. He lives like 5 blocks from Bordeaux, so it made sense to go over slides there instead of the office. She said Bordeaux like it was a footnote. Like I didn't know. I nodded. Didn't say anything. Just let the silence hang. She started unpacking the box, pulling out thick presentation boards, color samples, mock-ups. She kept talking about fonts, deadlines, someone named Elise from the client team who wanted the logo bigger. I watched her. Watched how she avoided my eyes. How her story included just enough detail to feel real. How her movements were precise. Rehearsed. Everything about her felt stage-managed, like she was trying to be convincing without sounding like she was trying to be convincing. She poured herself a glass of water, sat at the counter, and started scrolling through her phone. Screen tilted slightly away from me. I said goodnight and went upstairs. She didn't follow right away. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, heart beating slow and heavy. The house was quiet, but not the peaceful kind. More like the tense stillness before a storm. I wasn't angry, not yet, but I was alert, awake in a new way, like a switch had flipped. That screech *T. It was the moment everything shifted. Not because it proved something conclusive, but because it confirmed what I already suspected deep down. She wasn't just busy. She wasn't just tired. She was somewhere else entirely. And from that point forward, I started noticing everything. After that Thursday night, nothing felt like routine anymore. The script of our life, the shared dinners, the small rituals, the way we used to curl up on the couch for an hour before bed. All of it started to unravel slowly in these tiny, barely noticeable ways. Except now, I noticed everything. It began with the phone. Stephanie changed her passcode. She said it was a company-wide IT policy, part of some security compliance update. And to be fair, that wasn't unusual for her job. But when I asked if she'd share the new code, like we always had, she smiled and said, "It's complicated. I'm supposed to keep it private this time." I didn't argue. I nodded, maybe even laughed a little. But I didn't forget. She stopped taking calls in the kitchen. That one hit harder than I expected. 4 years, we had this unspoken rhythm. She'd cook, I'd clean. Or the other way around. And while she stirred pasta or chopped bell peppers, she'd take calls on speaker. Work, friends, her sister, whoever. I'd half listen while drying plates, chiming in when she needed help remembering someone's name or the title of that show we loved. But now her phone would ring, and she'd glance at it, say, "1 SEC," and step out onto the balcony, even if it was cold, even if the call lasted less than 30 seconds. Once, I followed a minute later, just to grab something off the grill. She immediately turned her back, dropped her voice, and walked toward the far edge of the deck like I was some stranger she didn't want overhearing a client brief. That was the first time it really clicked. She was hiding something, or someone. I didn't confront her. Not yet. I didn't want to seem paranoid. Instead, I started paying closer attention, carefully, methodically, like I was assembling pieces to a puzzle I didn't want to admit existed. The changes kept stacking up. She began dressing differently, and not in a dramatic, out-of-nowhere way. It was more subtle, intentional. She wore patent leather boots on a Wednesday morning, red lipstick on a random Monday, even though she usually reserved bold makeup for events. She'd always had great taste in clothes, but this was more curated, more polished. 3 new perfume bottles appeared on her side of the closet. One was light and floral, almost too sweet for her usual aesthetic. The second was something darker, S****. The third was the one she wore that Thursday night. I picked them up when she wasn't home, took pictures of the labels, looked them up online. One of them, an amberspice mix, was the top-rated scent for date nights on 3 different lifestyle blogs. I read the reviews. Women called it the one that makes them feel dangerous. One even said it was the only fragrance her boyfriend ever commented on without being asked. Stephanie had never once worn that one around me. Then there were the nights. Not too many. Not enough to raise suspicion if I wasn't already watching. But enough that I started writing them down in a notes app, one kept hidden inside a folder labeled Car Maintenance. Friday, March 3rd. Late strategy meeting with creatives. Home 11:30 p.m. Lipstick, heels, light makeup. Said it was Ryan's idea to rework slides. Tuesday, March 7th. Client dinner ran long. Back at 12:10 a.m. Claimed traffic. Hair freshly curled. Smelled like the new amber perfume. Saturday, March 11th. Said she was going to her sister's. Sister texted me earlier that day to ask if we wanted to grab brunch next weekend. No mention of tonight. Stephanie got home 1:15 a.m. Wore sneakers but had light makeup and styled hair. Mood was overly cheerful. At first, I hated myself for tracking her like that. Felt obsessive. But there was something deeper driving me. A need to make sure I wasn't crazy. That I wasn't imagining all of it. And the name Ryan kept coming up. It started off harmless. She'd drop it in stories about the office. Ryan said something hilarious today during the branding meeting. Ryan found this perfect stock photo for the eco campaign. Ryan's dog has an Instagram. It's ridiculous. And then it started getting woven into our world. You remember that place where we had margaritas for your birthday last year? Ryan lives in that neighborhood. Or, Ryan said he tried that ramen place we liked. He said it's gone downhill. Like she was stitching him into our history. Giving him context in my life. Rewriting the map so his presence didn't seem foreign. That's when I knew. It wasn't just a crush. It wasn't harmless. She was building a bridge between the two worlds. Ours and whatever existed on the other side. One morning I tested it. We were sitting at the kitchen table having breakfast. She was scrolling on her phone. I asked casually, "Does Ryan still live in Eastside?" She didn't even look up. Just replied, "Yeah, I think so." That was the moment I realized I had never told her I remembered his address. Never told her I knew what part of town he lived in. She just confirmed it because that's where she had been with him, and somewhere in her mind, she thought maybe she had said it out loud already. I'd lie in bed while she slept, staring at the ceiling, replaying old conversations, scanning them for inconsistencies. I remembered the work trip she took 2 months ago, the one where she said the hotel had terrible Wi-Fi and her texts came in hours late. I looked at the timestamps now with fresh eyes, realized the gaps weren't random. They were too clean, too spaced. 3 hours with no response. Then one reply, "Sorry, wild night." Heading to bed, grinning face with sweat, I scrolled up and found the part where she said her team was staying at the Marriott. But the receipt she'd left in the laundry basket showed a room from the Ashton, a boutique hotel across town. She never explained the switch. I never asked, but I still had the receipt. I put that in the car maintenance folder too. I didn't want to be the guy who snoops. I wasn't the jealous type. I'd always believed relationships should be built on trust. But now I was living in this strange middle space, half investigator, half husband, trying to make sense of a life that no longer added up. The hardest part? She was still being kind, still asking about my day, still making me coffee in the morning and kissing my cheek before heading out the door. But the warmth was gone. It was like watching someone perform your marriage instead of living it. Like she had memorized the lines but forgotten the feeling behind them. One night, she fell asleep on the couch, her phone buzzing with a notification. I didn't pick it up. I didn't read her texts. But I looked at the screen long enough to catch the name R. No last name, just R. I stared at it for a long time, then walked into the kitchen and poured myself a glass of water I didn't need. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I opened my laptop and created a folder titled April. I filled it with notes, *TS, timestamps. Not for confrontation. Not yet. I needed more. I needed certainty. I needed clarity. Because when the moment came, the real moment, I didn't want to flinch. I didn't want to be the guy who asked, "Are you sure?" I wanted to know. The lie had form now. It had a scent, a time range, a name, Ryan, and a routine that unfolded just barely outside my line of sight. And still, some part of me kept hoping I was wrong, that there was some innocent version of events I just couldn't see from where I stood, that maybe I was making a big deal out of nothing, stacking coincidence on top of suspicion until it looked like a structure it wasn't. But that threadbare hope unraveled the following Saturday. Stephanie said she was headed to Houston. There was a 2-day strategy retreat hosted by Ryan's team. She said they were prototyping branding visuals and testing mock-ups. Lots of workshopping, she added, using her favorite buzzword like a shield. We're staying at a studio near the waterfront, so I'll be offline most of the day. She packed the night before. Black dress pants, casual blazer, 2 pairs of flats. She left her curling iron out, something she rarely brought to work events, and a single pair of heels she said was, just in case there's dinner. I watched from the doorway, arms crossed, pretending to scroll my phone while she zipped her carry-on. I already knew she wasn't going to Houston. The tracking app I'd installed 2 nights earlier told me everything I needed to know. She hadn't gone to any of the places she claimed all week. Not that I checked obsessively, just enough to confirm the gut feeling that never stopped humming in the background. This time, I was going to see it with my own eyes. That morning, I rented a nondescript Toyota Corolla under a friend's name. Ball cap, hoodie, sunglasses, classic, maybe even cliché, but it worked. I parked a few blocks from the house and waited. She left at 8:32 a.m. Wheeling her bag to the car with that loose energy people have when they're excited for something they've convinced themselves is justified. She wasn't heading for the interstate. She took surface streets, drove west, not south. No highway, no detour, no hotel district, and definitely no waterfront studio. I followed at a safe distance, taking alternate lanes, skipping lights when necessary. I'd practiced this in my head too many times for it to feel new. Every turn felt like confirmation. At 9:12 a.m., she pulled into a side street just off 5th and Lavaca. It was a residential complex, modern, upscale, with frosted glass balconies and minimalist planters out front. I parked half a block down and angled my mirror toward the entrance. She got out slowly, checked her phone, touched up her lipstick in the side mirror, then walked across the street and pressed a buzzer. A few seconds later, the door opened, and there he was, Ryan. I recognized him instantly, not from photos, she didn't have any, but from the one time I'd visited her office for lunch. He had a clean, effortless kind of look, faded denim, short-cropped beard, smug posture. The kind of guy who smiles with half his face and thinks that's enough. They didn't hug, but they also didn't look like colleagues. There was a familiarity in how she tilted her head when he said something, how he reached behind her to grab the handle of her bag and touched the small of her back as they stepped inside. I started filming. I didn't zoom in, didn't narrate, just held my phone still, breathing slow, capturing the moment in plain silence. It was weirdly calm, almost surgical, like documenting a species in its natural habitat. No confrontation, no accusations, just facts. They didn't come out again for nearly 4 hours. When they did, she was wearing different earrings. Small detail, but it stuck with me. They walked down the block toward a coffee shop. He laughed at something she said, and she smiled like the rest of the world didn't exist. I caught the way their arms brushed, the casual way they shared a pastry without asking. I filmed that too, and then I left. I didn't follow them back. I didn't need to. I had enough, not just for proof, but for clarity. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of weakness. It was a second life. One she had carefully built parallel to ours. One with routines and rituals and inside jokes that didn't include me. On the drive home, I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just gripped the wheel tighter and let the silence fill every part of me that used to be confused. Because now I wasn't. Now I knew. I didn't go home right away. I took a detour, pulled off the freeway, and sat in the parking lot of a strip mall, just watching people walk in and out of stores. Parents wrangling toddlers. Couples holding hands. A guy trying to get a dog to stop barking at a shopping cart. It felt like watching a world I used to belong to. Eventually, I drove to a cheap motel just outside Austin. The kind with flickering signs and walls that smelled like bleach and reheated fast food. The bedspread was thin and synthetic. The faucet leaked. The AC hummed loud enough to drown out thought. And still, I couldn't sleep. I opened my phone, rewatched the footage. Once, twice. Not because I doubted it, but because I needed it to burn itself into memory. I needed to absorb every second so that when she came home with some perfectly timed smile and soft apology, I wouldn't hesitate. Because that's what I expected. The return. The explanation. The adjustment of facts. But now I had mine. In that motel room, I started organizing everything I'd collected. The **TS. The notes from her calendar. The text messages she sent with oddly timed replies. The tracking logs. The outfits that matched the wrong stories. The footage. I laid it all out in folders on my laptop, each with its own date and title. I wasn't doing it for revenge. I wasn't planning some confrontation with printed photos and courtroom energy. I was doing it for one reason. So I'd never second-guess myself again. Because gaslighting doesn't always sound like lies. Sometimes it sounds like logic, like sweet reassurances delivered just right. It's just work. You're being insecure. You don't have to worry. But when you have the truth in your pocket, you don't need to argue with fiction. That night, in a room that smelled like melted plastic and cigarette ghosts, I found peace in something brutal. Certainty. I wasn't going to wake up tomorrow and ask, what if? I already knew. The motel room was dim, but not dark. One of those rooms where the overhead light flickered like it was deciding whether to give up or not. The lamp beside the bed had a cracked shade. The carpet was matted with stains that told stories I didn't want to hear. I didn't bother turning on the TV. What was the point? There was only one movie playing in my head, and it was looping with perfect clarity. Stephanie, standing beside Ryan, smiling like he was her home now. I took off my hoodie, sat on the edge of the bed, and stared at my reflection in the dark TV screen. I looked older, not by years but by weight, like the air itself had added something to my shoulders. I hadn't cried yet, still haven't really. It wasn't sadness that followed me into that room. It was understanding, cold, sharp, and honest. I opened my laptop, dragged the folders from the desktop into a new one and named it, She Left First. That felt right. Not dramatic, just accurate. I didn't pack much when I left the house that morning. Just enough to disappear for a few days without setting off alarms. A couple of shirts, charger, my shaving kit, and the extra hard drive I used for client work. It held every project I'd done in the last 5 years, and now it held everything I'd collected on Stephanie. There wasn't a plan yet. Not a speech. Not even a confrontation. What I had was bigger than that. I had context. Every date, every time she'd lied, every moment she'd looked me in the face and sold me fiction. I had the receipt. And I needed that, because I didn't want to wonder later if I had imagined it all. I didn't want to end up in a therapist's office 2 years from now, spiraling into self-blame. I wanted evidence. Not for her. For me. I started labeling the files. March. Thursday, work party lie. Lounge screensh *T, PNG. Red wine receipt, table for 2. PDF. Live location share, timeline. MP4-inch. April. Saturday, Houston lie, entry footage. MOV. Walk to cafe, hand brush clip. MOV. Changed earrings, note. TXT. I didn't skip anything. Even the stuff that felt small. Like the wine glass. The new perfume bottle. The extra 10 minutes she took to come inside after parking. All of it had weight now. It belonged to a timeline. And timelines tell stories. By the time I finished sorting, it was nearly 3 a.m. I lay back on the bed, staring up at the ceiling fan that wasn't moving. The air smelled like old soap and motel cleaner. There was a buzzing light just outside the window, flickering like a dying star. It reminded me of the night we got stuck in a thunderstorm during a road trip to Santa Fe. Back when our problems were silly things. Missed turns, cheap wine hangovers, forgotten toothbrushes. Now I was here, in a room no one would find me in, living in a version of my life I hadn't agreed to. The next morning, I woke up with my jaw sore from clenching. My phone had 2 missed calls. One from Stephanie, time-stamped at 11:04 p.m. The other was at 12:30 a.m. Voicemail. I didn't listen to it. I didn't want to hear her voice yet. I wasn't ready to step back into her version of the story. Instead, I went out for coffee. There was a diner across the highway. Plastic menus. Coffee so weak it looked like tea. But the waitress smiled like she meant it, and no one asked questions when I brought my laptop in and stayed for 3 hours. I didn't look at footage this time. I wrote. Not a confession. Not a revenge plan. Just memory. My version. I wrote about the first time we met. How she wore that faded denim jacket with the tear in the elbow and pretended not to care about anything, but laughed too hard at a bad joke I made about parking meters. I wrote about our apartment and how we used to dance in the kitchen while the pasta boiled. About how she started playing lo-fi beats every morning in the shower, and how that sound used to be my favorite thing. I wrote until I couldn't anymore. Then I hit save. Labeled the file. What was real? Back at the motel, I started thinking about going home. Not for long. Just enough to see what version of the truth she was going to serve when I walked through the door. Because I knew Stephanie. I knew she wouldn't open with an apology. She'd open with context. Reasons. Stress. Timing. Work pressure. She'd use soft words with hard edges. And I needed to hear that. Not to forgive her, but to finish the timeline. So I stayed one more night in that room making notes. Not about her. About me. Who I was before all this. Who I didn't want to lose in the process. I wrote things like, don't let this turn you bitter. You didn't imagine the good years. But don't romanticize the last ones. She made a choice. Repeatedly. You deserve honesty. Not just love. Don't go back to survive what you weren't meant to carry. I filled a page and taped it to the inside of my bag. A checklist for emotional clarity. Then I sat on the bed and watched the sun set through dirty curtains. I thought about how quiet endings can be. How you always expect the betrayal to come like a punch in the chest. But more often it comes softly. In red wine. In laughter meant for someone else. In lipstick applied for the wrong reasons. And somehow that's worse. Because it doesn't just break you. It changes what you thought you were protecting. By the third night, I knew it was time. Time to go back. Not to confront. Not to yell. Just to walk through the wreckage with open eyes. See the house for what it had become. A gallery of false calm. A museum of what used to be real. I packed up my things. Zipped the laptop shut. Left the key on the counter. The motel clerk didn't ask questions. He just nodded. Handed me a receipt. And went back to watching baseball on a tiny wall-mounted screen. Outside, the air was cool. Not fresh exactly, but clear. I got in the car, turned the ignition, and pulled out onto the highway. The truth sat beside me in the passenger seat. Quiet, present, permanent. And for the first time in weeks, I didn't feel confused. I felt awake. I pulled into the driveway just after 10 a.m. On a Tuesday, the neighborhood was still quiet. A few sprinklers ticked rhythmically in the distance. Somewhere a dog barked at nothing. The same sounds that used to feel like comfort now just sounded far away, like a memory I wasn't part of anymore. From the curb, everything looked untouched. Porch plants alive. Mailbox closed. Curtains drawn halfway like usual. For a second, I could have convinced myself it was just another morning, and I'd simply returned from a weekend trip. But then I stepped through the front door, and I smelled it. Lemon cleaner. Vanilla candles. The fake kind, the kind you light not because you like the scent, but because you're trying to create a mood and atmosphere. The smell of apology without words. Everything was spotless. The throw blanket on the couch folded. Cushions arranged like we had company coming. My slippers set neatly by the chair where I always tossed them carelessly. The kitchen counters gleamed. The stove was on low, something simmering. Chicken. Roasted just the way I liked it. Rosemary. Garlic. Lemon wedges placed carefully around the edges like some Pinterest tutorial had been followed step by step. The dining table was already set for two. Cloth napkins. The good ones. It wasn't our home. It was a stage. Stephanie stepped out of the hallway just then. She was dressed in loungewear. Sweatshirt, leggings, socks. But I saw it immediately. The mascara. The lip balm that caught the light just enough. The hair that had been brushed, curled, and then intentionally tousled to look effortless. She smiled, and it nearly broke me. Not because I believed it, but because I used to. "Hey," she said softly, like we were picking up from a paused movie. "Hey," I replied, and walked past her into the kitchen. The chicken was nearly done. Timer set. I turned it off. "I didn't know when you'd be back," she added behind me, voice light. "So I figured I'd just clean the house and cook my favorite meal?" I said, not unkindly, just plainly. She hesitated. "I guess I wanted things to feel normal. They're not." "I know." I turned around slowly, leaning against the counter. Her face was calm, braced, like she had prepared for this conversation. She wasn't panicking. She wasn't defensive. She looked ready. That scared me more than anything. "I thought we should talk," she said. "Sure." I nodded. "Let's talk." But for a moment neither of us did. She sat down at the edge of the dining table, resting her hands in her lap. I remained standing. "I think we've both been feeling something shift," she began, choosing her words like she was defusing a bomb. "And I know I've been distant. I've been holding things in." I waited. She looked up, eyes wide, almost misty. "There's been a lot of pressure at work. A lot of confusion. Ryan and I have spent a lot of time together. And I know you've noticed." I raised an eyebrow. "You've been spending time with Ryan?" Her eyes darted to mine, hesitated. "Not like that." "Not like what?" She swallowed. "I mean, it's been professional. Mostly. But I can see how things might have looked." I cut her off. "Stephanie, I followed you. I saw you go to his apartment. I saw you two walk to that cafe. I watched him touch your back. I saw your face when you looked at him." Her mouth opened, then closed. Her breath caught in her throat like a skipped heartbeat. "You followed me?" "I did." She blinked hard, lips trembling. "So you've known?" "I've known enough," I said. "I knew before the chicken, before the perfume, before you changed your passcode. But now I've seen it, and I filmed it. I didn't want guesses. I needed truth." There was no panic in her then, no meltdown, no anger, just a long silence. And then, her eyes dropped. She nodded slowly. That was it. Not a defense, not a fight, just that small movement of her head, like someone accepting something they'd rehearsed in private. That silence, that was her confession, not in words, but in posture, in the absence of denial. "How long?" I asked. She didn't look up. "Stephanie, how long?" "A couple of months," she said. "It wasn't supposed to be anything, but it is." She nodded again. I let the silence sit between us for a while, let it stretch out like a drawn curtain. "You could have just said something," I said finally. "I didn't know how." "That's not true. I didn't want to hurt you. You didn't want to be the villain." Her head snapped up then, eyes full. "That's not fair." "It's completely fair. You didn't want to hurt me, but you did. You didn't want to lie, but you did. You didn't want to choose, but you did. Every time you left, every time you smiled at me while carrying a secret in your pocket, you made a choice." "I never wanted this," she said. "No one ever does. But here we are." She stood up then, slowly, like gravity had doubled. She started, but trailed off. I thought maybe we could talk. Be honest. Try to find our way back. I stared at her. She still thought there was a version of this where it could be repaired. Still believed that maybe, if she cleaned the floors and roasted a chicken and admitted just enough to earn empathy, that we could glue this thing back together. But I'd been to the other side. I'd seen the way she smiled when she wasn't with me. There was no going back. I'm not angry, I said. I just see it now, and I can't unsee it. Her voice cracked. So what now? I looked around the room. The polished surfaces, the perfectly arranged table, the glass of wine she'd poured in advance that sat untouched. A scene meant to soften the blow, or delay it. I go upstairs, I said. I pack a few things. I leave for now. She stepped forward. Can't we? No. Her breath hitched. Just like that. I didn't answer. I walked toward the stairs. Halfway up, I paused. Not for drama. Just to say the thing that had been sitting on my chest since I saw her with him. You left first, Stephanie. All I'm doing now is catching up. When I reached our bedroom, I didn't cry. I opened drawers like I was staying at a hotel, collecting only the essentials. 3 shirts, my laptop, charger, deodorant, a small bag of toiletries, passport, water bottle. It wasn't an escape. It was a reset. I zipped the bag and took one last look around the room. The bed was made. The same sheets we picked out at that boutique store in Portland. I ran my hand over the pillow and felt nothing. Downstairs, she hadn't moved. She was still standing by the table. The chicken had started to cool. The timer flashed, long forgotten. She turned when I reached the door, eyes wet but quiet. I never meant to destroy everything, she said. I nodded. Destruction doesn't need intent, just action, and you've been acting for a while. She opened her mouth again, but I didn't wait. I opened the door, stepped out into the daylight. The air was cool, brisk, fresh. It didn't smell like candles. It didn't smell like perfume. It smelled like concrete and leaves and the vague hint of someone grilling down the block. It smelled like freedom, and I walked. I went upstairs without slamming doors. No anger, no heat, just motion. I packed deliberately shirts, jeans, charger, passport. Enough to leave, not to run. When I came back down, Stephanie was still by the couch. Eyes red but her body still. She whispered, I never meant to destroy everything. I nodded. Destruction isn't about intention. It's about choice. She didn't chase me, didn't beg. She stayed frozen, waiting for a version of me that might still hold her hand. But that version was gone. I walked out. The door clicked shut behind me, quiet as a breath. The air outside hit different. No candles, no perfume, no performance. Just street sounds and wind. And for the first time in weeks, I inhaled deeply without choking on doubt. I didn't look back. Not once. A week later, I returned only for the rest of my things. On the table, an envelope. Her handwriting. I opened it, read one line. I'm sorry I broke us, and folded it shut. That was enough. I rented a place near a lake, quiet mornings and silent phones. I stopped checking for her name, stopped rehearsing imaginary arguments. I let it all fall, not out of strength but out of need. I didn't rage. I didn't seek revenge. I didn't forgive her either. That's not what healing is. I chose peace, not pity. Solitude, not bitterness. This wasn't victory. It was survival with dignity. I deleted our photos, blocked her number. There was no dramatic closure, just stillness. In the end, I wasn't the one who got left behind. I was the one who walked forward and didn't look back.